when business owners think about scaling something, if you grew it tenfold right now, would your customer benefit and where would be the bottlenecks if you instantly grew that? If you don't have a clear answer, take a step back and understand and reassess what you're building. Artificial intelligence is going to unlock economies, individuals being able to create microeconomies and systems around themselves because they are being true to the thing that they're wired to do. The future of human flourishing requires you to truly understand human pain. So build for people, truly. Measure what matters, and then refuse to scale harm.
This is the Relentless Pursuit of Winning podcast, where we are here to educate, equip, and inspire people to build extraordinary companies. We're so glad you're here. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you can get updates every time we drop a new episode. Now, let's get it started. Hey, folks, welcome to another episode of the Relentless Pursuit of Winning podcast. My name is Rick Meekins. I am your host today. And in our studio, we have Art Serna. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing wonderful, Rick. Glad to be here and having this meaningful conversation with you and your audience.
Likewise, my friend. Likewise, my friend. I am looking forward to diving into this. But audience, if you haven't done it already, if you would, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell so that you can get updates every time we drop a new episode. And without further ado, let's get to it. So, Art, you've got an amazing story. You've got an amazing history. And I want to give our audience just a little taste of that before we dive deep. Sound good?
Sounds perfect.
All right. So let us know who you are, what you do, and why you do what you do.
Yeah, Rick, I like to say I live in the intersection of human flourishing, technology, and systems. And when I talk about systems, I think they're applicable across industry. But for me, that was really developed at the proximity of human pain in different sets of industries, from government industries overseeing millions of kids in Texas in foster care to now global healthcare in terms of scoliosis intervention, and then supporting leaders that are doing the same. But in all of it, my story, as I captured it recently in my book, The Unknown's Rising, was about connecting the dots of stories of the future builders in this new era that we're all in post-COVID. Have so many friends that post-COVID, their lives were completely reimagined, mine included, that find me in a new environment. But at the same time, I backtracked my entire journey over 25 years, had the benefit of raising millions of dollars, over $19 million for efforts that mattered to me. And now I'm making a small pivot to say, now I want to dedicate it just to narrow down the focus to the things to me that matter the most to advance human flourishing. And so that's what I write about in The Unknown's Rising. I do it through two main things. So in describing me, so I do it as a leader of Spine Hope, which is a global pediatric organization that provides surgeries for kids ages 2 to 21 across the world who wouldn't otherwise have access to this. So they suffer from spine deformities that are impacting their quality of life and life expectancy. And then the other one is, as the founder of Cosmos Renewed, which I would say that's my consulting advisory work that I do to support small to medium-sized business leaders. Many of them are Latino and or multicultural leaders that are trying to figure out strategy in this new world and this new normal. How do I build my brand? How do I build a technology layer around the work and concept that I have to make it be successful, provide for my family? So I'm trying to help people reach the middle class by taking their secret sauce, their magic idea in their heart and helping it bring it to the world.
Awesome. I love that. I'm going to use this term loosely, business success in business. A lot of our audience are entrepreneurs. And I hear the stuff that you're working on now seem to be close to your heart. These are things that you're passionate about. But what I want to hear, because we don't start here, in a place where we can operate at that level. I want to hear where you started from, your journey, up to where we got now. I know that you've been through a lot, you've done a lot of different things. So our audience wants to hear that, because we don't start with, everything's not a win. We go through it all.
Yeah, absolutely. So I like to say the thorough line for me, I've got a memory as a child, right? Growing up in South Texas, I grew up between two worlds, was born in Texas. So had citizenship early on, but my parents actually at the time in South Texas, the borders were a lot more fluid, a lot more back and forth, illegal migration back and forth. And my parents worked across in Texas, but had their home when they first got married in Mexico. So I went to school there from K through third. Spanish was my first language. So coming in fourth grade was quite a big disruption in terms of learning an entirely new language, fumbling through all of that. But at the same time, they built a ton of grit, right? Mindset early on that I didn't even know I needed, but it built it nonetheless. Going through the like discomfort of learning something completely new, rewiring my brain, understand more about the science of the brain during all of that journey. And at the same time, looking at my family living the hero's journey. So the entrepreneurial journey of what they would say the dream to achieve more for their family. So both of them worked and did a lot of things over their lifetime. But I would say they were the first entrepreneurs in our family, and they had the grit to prove it. And they did that based out of value for them. It was the love of the three kids that all of a sudden they were like 1921. They had twins. They weren't expecting twins. Soon after my younger brother, they had three kids. So I tell people, at least for me, there's this memory in my mind of sitting at night watching television, and my parents are not there. Latchkey kids are trying to provide. They're working late, and watching out the window, and just there was this deep longing to say, I really want them to be here. And so for me, that was the energy. For whatever reason, that stayed with me. It built a lot of my desire and appetite to do better, become better, because I wanted to create a system where maybe that wasn't the reality, right? That it could balance. We understood we had needs, financial needs. So everything as I look at my life was shaped. That was the catalytic desire. And became a student athlete, became valedictorian in my high school class. So all of that was coming from somewhere. Most of it was healthy. I want something better, and I believe it can happen. Some of it just gets all messy with like performance and imposter syndrome, all that kind of stuff in the journey.
Yeah.
But ultimately, that's where the journey started to say, I want something, I want to provide for my future family better. And I want to not have to work as hard as my parents did, because I believe they deserve more rest. They're doing that now in life. But that was the genesis, and I can unpack that based on where you want to take it. But I that still keeps me going. That model of the reason for being, and your kind of like what Simon Sinek calls the golden circle of your why. That was my why.
Yeah. The why is so foundational. I love that. It's just, you can you can maintain any what if you have a strong why. Is that how it is?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, basically, I think at least Simon says that is people don't care what you do. They care why you do it. Right.
Yeah. So what was your first entrepreneurial venture? You've got this grit, you got this foundational grit, you have this vision of, bigger picture vision. What was your first venture?
Yeah. I think my first encounter with entrepreneur was sales, and it was selling knives in South Texas.
Yeah.
Going door to door and trying to sell knives, and recognize that just wasn't quite my fit. But I think it was my twin brother. He's got the sales gene. That's his secret place, his happy place. And so I did a bunch of stuff with him. So I believe it was Cutco Cutlery at the time. And so we got our teeth cut through that in South Texas. But I realized that what that did for me, Rick, was connected me with the power of understanding your customer, your consumer, the person you're we had to sit down with somebody, at their kitchen table, and really seek to listen and understand what was their pain point. Maybe that our product or thing, like really interact with them and realize something as simple as how you hold the knife and how it feels in your hand could be a selling point. So I understood that very early. And at the same time, doing AmeriCorps as an experience in my local community as service year at AmeriCorps as a senior taught me something about understanding community that I've now extrapolated to understanding people, understanding behavior, and truly figuring out what is the job to be done, from like Clayton Christensen talks about that in business. What is the job you're trying to do or your customer's trying to do, and how do you fit that need?
Yeah. What were important lessons about people and perhaps that human connection that you learned during that time?
Well, over time, I've really been one to think about systems and how they come to be, how they're designed. You've heard it said, systems do what they do. They do what you designed them to do, and they do that very, very good. So when thinking about working with people at my scale, so overseeing, say, systems of education as an example, with the consumer being the direct consumer, families, parents, kids, and understanding sadly, many of those large systems are failing on a very basic level. Like, can a child read? Can a child do basic math? And when you look at the numbers, they're failing tremendously around many communities. So one, I recognize that the concept of design flaws, when business owners think about scaling something, it goes beyond growth. It goes beyond, can you actually get some economies of scale as you do that? But when you scale, you build those systems, you're going to replicate those design flaws. And if you're not deeply familiar with your customer base, what their true pain points are, and you haven't seen them in their environment, like, you can try to solve at a board level throw money at the problem, like many boards do, like school boards do. But unless you've been in the classroom, I've had the benefit of working with Teach for America as well and seeing directly what happens in classrooms. So I've been able to now take those lessons and help people find, what is your magic sauce when you think about your business model, when you think about your strategy, when you're thinking about pivoting from what you were doing pre-COVID to the new. Do you truly understand that special sauce that makes your whatever product, service, offering unique enough? And should you be thinking about scaling it? Because what often happens in these large scaled systems is that they have a ton of design flaws. And if, I like to ask people, like, if your thing, whatever the thing is, really, if you grew it tenfold right now, who would benefit? Would your customer benefit if you were to do that right now? And where would be the bottlenecks if you instantly grew that? And if you don't have a clear answer, I think that's an invitation for you to take a step back and understand and reassess, what you're building.
Mm-hmm. How do you guide people through that process of refining the system so it works, so it can scale?
Yeah, I think the logic models, it's a benefit that you've learned in social impact ventures, really understanding the inputs and the outputs, and how do you get from point A to point B? Can you actually map it out in the more simplistic way? And if you can't do that, then that's a good sign that you don't fully understand the system that you built or all the components of it, right? So logic models force you to really map out in simple terms, all of the current inputs that you believe are there, all of the activities that go into that, and the flow between those things. So that's typically sitting down with a founder, a business owner, or a leader and helping them think out loud and then map out directly, pen to paper, conceptualize it. What is your current system? Is it actually first mapping it out? And then the next thing, Rick, is actually testing it in the actual environment and this is where many people miss it. Actually testing it in the environment of the actual consumer that will use your solution. As an example, there's stories written about an organization that scaled and wanted to provide water in communities in Africa, and they had this new prototyping concept of merry-go-rounds. Right? They'd seen kids play around. They said, "Oh, this is a brilliant idea. We're going to just put merry-go-rounds that, as they move, it will actually generate what's needed to pump the water." So, and all of it. The reality was, and they had all sorts of backing and support, philanthropy and influencers behind it, was that, kids got bored after, a couple of minutes of doing that. And so what ended up happening was women in the community had to be the ones to do it. It just didn't scale well because they hadn't tested in the actual environment and they didn't understand the cultural nuance of what was happening. And I think that would be my advice to any founder, especially if they're thinking reinvention at this point, to really get clear, one, about the concept, right? The logic model. And then the other thing is actually testing their assumptions in a real environment with their target user.
Yeah, that makes sense. I always think about it in terms of trying to break the system. It's like where are those danger points, if you will, and just digging into that. Taking an engineering perspective, I guess. Is that kind of what you're thinking?
Yeah, that deconstruction can be one way to do it. Absolutely.
Yeah. What are other ways to do it?
Well, I mean, I think for now, for you, I'm not an engineer. I don't know if that's your background, right? So I think it's one way to do it is to take it cross industry. Is there a cross industry application to what you're doing, even if it's a test, right? Because even sometimes when you change the environment, you learn something fresh, just like taking a concept and an idea that you might love and because you did it in community X, and you take it to community B or customer B, and you actually recognize doesn't work the same. You didn't fully understand it. And sometimes even that change in environment context can give you good feedback loops to say, oh, actually, I don't fully appreciate what we really had. And
Mm-hmm.
doing that test can illuminate new things that you can try.
That makes sense. All right, let's get back into your journey. So you were working up until COVID. What were you doing until that point? And then you mentioned that you had a threshold moment at that time.
Yeah, so I was leading community level work both in community healthcare in the Milwaukee area. So previous to that, I was working with Teach for America and scaling. Teach for America. I've been around now 30 years, and that's when everything got shut down. I was in Oklahoma City, learned a lot, but I knew I had not been a teacher. I just worked with communities, so understood the customer base and working with large systems like Oklahoma City Public Schools. And I had taken a trip to Nepal, Kathmandu. It was a global conference on scaling innovation and a global summit. And so I talked to leaders from Nepal and around the world. And I recognized that I needed a new lane to do the work that I was passionate about, which again, it was becoming clear to me. It was about human flourishing. So I came back and I wanted to do work out connected to human pain, human flourishing, but not centered on education, or at least not directly the way it was. I wanted to have direct access to the consumer. And so my family moved to Milwaukee area to support local coalitions around healthcare, mental health for young people. And that's when we learned a lot. We learned about dental care communities, urban communities in the US. So I did that for about 5.5 years. And at the same time in that journey, I was traveling as well, learning more about global things like global equity, global justice, access to healthcare. My mother in my journey went through a cancer diagnosis, and I was one of her advocates at the time, just because of the English to Spanish language translation. And I that became a pillar of my journey. So global healthcare just made sense that was something I wanted to do. And until October 2020, when I had this deep personal experience that just really turned my world upside down in terms of understanding who I was going to become, and became really the genesis of the Journey of the Unknown's Rising book.
Mm-hmm. What happened? Was there something? Was there an event or something like that inspired that transformation?
Yeah, I think it was. So my grandfather many years ago had in South Texas, he was a farm worker, never learned to read, but was an incredible man, had an incredible drive to support community. So he worked in the fields. I mean, I still remember him coming home and the smell from the trunk that was just so honeydew and melons and watermelons coming from his car, and him bringing them to the family for us to enjoy together. But in his journey, Rick, he was very troubled, had a lot of trauma early in his life, and he had this deep encounter with God in his journey, and that encounter changed him as a man in how he saw the world, how he dealt with trauma, and how he dealt with others. It was like before and after. It was so transformative, and his entire life he told stories about post that journey for him, how it changed his life. And then at his funeral, the way he was remembered by just community members that had benefited from his journey in life all came out. All that to say, for me, over my lifetime, I had a variety of encounters with God that defined who I was going to be as a leader, as a husband, as a man, as a entrepreneur, as a coach, etc. And the Unknown's Rising, for me, coming out of COVID, was trying to seek understanding of what is this that's happening after COVID pandemic, and what is the future going to be like. And I had to I began this discipline of fasting and prayer, right? That was just kind of the journey of meditation, journey becoming still and having deeper questions. And I had this deep, I would say, spiritual encounter at this gathering, that if anyone that's familiar with like Christian doctrine and like biblical history, very similar to a leader in those references, that story of Daniel, that he had a variety of encounters, that he saw aspects of what was to come, and it deeply impacted him, like physically, emotionally, to the point that there were days that he was just exhausted. It was like, I needed to rest, recuperate from this encounter I just had. So October 2020 for me was an invitation into seeing a future that wasn't. And to be honest, I go into the references in the book. There was another individual in scripture, Isaiah, who said, "Whoa, I had this powerful encounter, and I don't believe that I'm actually worthy of this thing." And I felt very similar to that. It took me 5 years to really unpack what happened in that encounter, which was seeing an aspect of the future, an aspect of new builders that were going to come on the scene that would be dynamically different than the current kind of power structure around the globe. If you were to say the 7 top billionaires that lead and massively are changing the future of humanity, that it would be different. They would operate from a different norm and they would carry a different story, right? And so I didn't fully know what to do with that. Yeah. Honestly. And even for myself, I think when you receive I imagine just like any entrepreneur, you've got to really be with yourself and determine, like, am I suitable enough to carry this, whatever it is, this vision, this thing that I just seen. And I was trying to do still 2 things, do the thing that I have been doing and do this and try to make meaning of both. And I realized over time in 5 years that I couldn't do both, right? Something was going to break, and it ended up being that I was the one who broke at the end of that, and at the end of 25. And that really all came to giving me a time to step back and then determining across really 10 years of personal journals, everything I'm telling you now about the story, the why, came from that season, and to doing a repivot, which is what I'm doing now.
You kind of like brushed over, a lot of that. You were telling me, or you mentioned, God was, directing, some of your thinking, some of your ideas, your business direction, that sort of thing. And even, with we'll call it the prophecy, that you saw, what were those experiences like? And the basis for this is, sometimes, as entrepreneurs, we sense something, within us, and we don't know if it's, just, a cracker that was stale that we ate the other day, or, it's really God speaking through us, or something else.
Yeah.
And so it would be really helpful to get get some framework around that if you can.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm going to do your question justice, but I try my best. So yeah. So I understood it was different than normal. I knew that almost immediately. One, it was almost like an out of body experience. So the context around me, it was a room full of people, so I wasn't alone. But I recognized that it was almost like getting this adaptive framework of leadership of, like, can you get on top? Can it get in the ceiling, look down? It was almost like that. I was visually seeing what was happening, but I wasn't. I was looking at myself as this was happening. Almost, it was that type of feeling. And I knew that there were components, like my physiology was being impacted at the moment that this all was happening. It's almost like when people go into, if you think about the most extreme sport you've ever done or extreme experience, where like everything, adrenaline, everything in your body, you're just in this powerful moment, right? It was, everything in me was alive. It was activated. I could, my senses were, I was in a flow. And so I knew this was different. And so in one, it was like this component of wholeness. I knew, like, my physical body was alive. It wasn't numb. It was fully present, I guess I would say. My physical self was fully present. I could feel things in the room. I could feel things around me. But 2, my mind was supercharged in that moment. It was like this incredible moment of flow, of knowing even things I shouldn't know, meaning like I just have an awareness, and maybe in hyperflow people experience something like this deep clarity that was present. And then last of all, for me, I believe you've got another layer of being, right? The spiritual component of the spirit of your essence. And that was very present. That wasn't like distant in the back. It was actually very forward and present. That it almost made the time slow down. So in all of that, I don't know that that's a framework, but it was a 3-dimensional experience for me, that I knew this is different. It wasn't just me daydreaming or or like having these cool ideas. I knew every aspect of me was like fully present in that moment. And then I think to test it for me over time since that October 2020 experience, it was being able to share that one, journal it down, write it down, conceptualize it, like, what is this? Make meaning of it, and then sharing it with a group of trusted advisors around me to
Yeah.
test it. Like, okay. And so it wasn't, I needed to let it marinate and almost get some testing, pressure tested,
Yeah.
lay it down for a time until it could be do that. So I did that with my, like one of my mentors, and then some local leaders in the community that knew me that were present in that time. But I would say I wasn't ready to fully unpack the meaning. When you read the book, this experience happened October 2020. Some of the
Hmm.
concepts of what I felt that I saw weren't even around yet, at least not publicly. So I do some writing in the book around the availability of future tools and mechanisms that would change and come alongside these future leaders. And ChatGPT hadn't really been publicly announced till October 2022, November 2022. So it was 2 years.
Yeah.
So I didn't fully understand what I saw fully. I couldn't fully appreciate it. And so it took a season of me learning and studying and scrutinizing it, receiving other forms of, I would call it like strategic intelligence, until I could fully put it all together in what became The Unknown's Rising as a manuscript. And then feeling like I myself was at a place that I could embody this new idea and lead any future partners, teams around the concepts behind the book.
Wow. 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 How did this experience change you? And I'm going to say, I'm imagining there was an evolution from the time you had the actual experience through, the 5 years after in development of
Yeah.
the book and that sort of thing. So walk me kind of through how you've changed over these years, since your experience.
One, it truly humbled me, honestly. Being a firstborn, and if you got any entrepreneurial gene, you understand the drive that drives that journey, which is
Hmm.
sometimes very hyper driven, goal oriented. You drive teams, you drive people. I think that's a gift. It can also be a curse. And that experience for me deeply humbled me in terms of like, this type of thing is bigger than me,
Hmm.
and I cannot do it with others. So I believe it helped me more deeply value relationship in a way that I had not. Both
Hmm.
human relationships, business relationships, and then the power of trust in all of that, in communication. So in anything that you build, I've realized it's only going to go as far or last as long as the trust you've been able to bake into it. So either trust with your customer, trust with whatever you're able to deliver, your brand promise, whatever that is, you carry and you embody that. And I appreciate that, I guess I would say, Rig, more than I have in the past. And so I've learned to become, I hope so. Again, it's like me tooting my own horn. I hope I become a better listener, both to those that are closest to me, who watch me go through that journey of becoming and waiting. At the same time, I become more deeply confident in my own self. So in the journey I describe, you go from system to system, like a elementary school system, middle school system, educational system, right? That tends to wire you in its own form, right?
Hmm.
So it actually can inhibit you as a business leader, as a creative thinker, can get in the way, and then you have to almost like do an unlearning process over decades.
Yeah.
Right. And so it taught me to do that process more quickly on myself and be my biggest innermost champion, understanding who I truly was. Because when the noise got really quiet in a place of isolation and meaning making, then I could better hear who am I really and what are the fights that I'm committed to fight, the
Hmm.
non-negotiables, if that makes sense. And
Hmm.
as opposed to having the world define what those should be for me.
Hmm.
And maybe somebody else doesn't struggle with that. But I think when you're trying to reach a lot of firsts and reach your first million or 10 million, whatever your goal is, or just your first 100 customers, you can get in the way, all the noise inside you. And so helping you define and narrow down what truly matter, your non-negotiables, I think can be incredibly important. Last of all, it gave me the appreciation of foresight as my responsibility, meaning if I seen the future that nobody else has because it was
Hmm.
entrusted to me, can I steward that vision adequately during the rest of the years that I have, left to do something functionally and valuable for humanity. And I appreciate that now every day when I open my eyes and I think through that appreciation of having seen that vision of the world that is to become, and then get active in what is it that I can do to help build the systems relationally that will define the future of whatever world, whether it's small or big, that I have the pleasure of engaging with. How do I help build those systems that are better and have at the center the type of human flourishing that I saw in my vision, if that makes sense?
It does. It does. I hear I really make the connection with the humility that you display. It's you're entrusted, with this future vision, but you're not coming at it from a position of power, but from a position of service, of stewardship, which is remarkable. I think that's amazing. One of the things that you talked about was AI and its impact. And we're in the throes of it now. It's changed the way that we work. What is your experience, or what are your thoughts around AI at this point?
I'll just because of the focus on my book, Rick, I'm going to say it this way. So there's an account in biblical history about this individual. His name was Moses, that had lived in a place of power and influence in his day. Right, it was in the greatest palace, greatest empire of his time, and then things changed for him. But he has this deep encounter with the greatest intelligence that ever was or will be, and God encounters him, right? And in this burning bush experience. And in that encounter, he has a commission for him. He allows us to see the future. He foretells the future to him. This is what will happen. And this is my invitation to you. Are you willing to take it? And in his Moses trying to make meaning of that encounter for him, he basically asks the question of, they will not believe me when I go to them. When I try to go build this business or do this thing, they will not believe that I'm adequate to do this. And there's this moment that I believe is deeply powerful to your question. God asked Moses, what is it that you have in your hand? And at the time, Moses had a staff. So he had a staff in his hand that he used in his work that he did. He was a sheep herder at the time, right? Economically, that's what he did. And he said, I want you to throw it down. And basically in that moment, that staff became a vehicle of showing the sovereignty of God, or that super intelligence in that moment. And it created that staff transformed, right, into different things. It became a supernatural thing that he took to Pharaoh, the head of that empire at the time. And many times you see references, the opening of the Red Sea happened with that staff. So that tool of that day, under the sovereignty of the greatest superintelligence, in the hands of somebody that had a submitted heart of stewardship, meaning it wasn't about Moses, it was about the bigger vision that he was fulfilling. So I believe, for at least my reference point, given the Honors Rising vision I had, that the continued development of artificial intelligence, one, is not a surprise to the greatest superintelligence that ever will be in God, and two, that he is engaging human agents, meaning God, just like he did Moses, to say, I have a plan for humanity, and I believe it's about human flourishing. And for those that are willing to lay down their concepts, like to submit to that superintelligence, meaning God, that God will use in the same way that he did it for Moses. He will take that artificial intelligence as a tool for humanity over the next 30, 50 years and help them create the greatest type of inventions, prototypes, solutions to humanity's pain points that ever will. At the same time, I think there's an invitation to how to become the human agents that build the guardrails for the future development of that man-made intelligence. So in that, for me, artificial intelligence, I believe, is going to support these human agents. For me, I have a heart for folks that are unknown, that are the underdog, that nobody knows right now. And I believe that they are uniquely set up to have these tools come in their hands. And as they go on this journey, that artificial intelligence, as it develops alongside these leaders, are going to unlock economies, generational wealth, as well as influence in a way that we haven't seen, like individuals being able to create microeconomies and systems around themselves because they are being true to the thing that they're wired to do. That's what I see.
Okay, that makes sense. Tell us about the unknown rising.
Yeah. So the book breaks down my story of becoming, I believe, in this era, being able to increase trust in everything you do is going to be vital, right? As you try to solve for this deep fakes, being able to tell a personal story is deeply important. So the book tells my journey and story, right, of becoming, of the encounter, what led to it, the meaning I drew behind it. But then it actually captures stories of different leaders, influencers, and billionaires, how they came to go from point A to the original idea to actually creating this dynamic company or venture. And so I tell that story and then just unpacks as frameworks and tools to do, for example, I call it the internal audit, where as a founder, you go through that meaning making, understanding what truly you're wired to do, that you're unique can do, your life experience helps you, gives you credibility and authenticity to say, I've done this somewhere else, whatever the context. Therefore, I can take that and build something with the support of artificial intelligence to solve X problem. So through the chapters, I unpack different tools. I give examples of others that have done it. And then ultimately, I invite people into the community to say, be part of this new breed of builders and leaders that are going to rise from all the kind of the ends of the earth. And let's build this community together. And so that's what the Unknowns Rising book is. And so where I do that is through unknownsrising.com, where
Mhm.
people, I have the initial assessment that people can come and take for free and then assess like, hey, where am I at in that building journey
Mm.
relative to, for example, my journey, and say, well, if I need help, what can I do next? So that's there. They can find other tools of PDFs of guides and frameworks in that, but ultimately they can connect to my story. My hope is that people are encouraged if they've been sitting with this idea of feeling unknown, unappreciated, or in essence, they don't have deep clarity who they are because they've been defined by a system, like a department and a company, and now all of a sudden they're laid off and they're struggling in that moment. My hope is that the book is an encouragement to them, Rick, to say maybe this is an opportunity for you to build something that maybe you never gave yourself the opportunity to do so, and this is now take the first step.
Yeah, yeah, that's really powerful. I think that's important. It's like there's been so many shifts in careers. We've got another podcast called Bridging the Gap, and we talk to people that are in transition. And we hear these conversations over and over again, and the opportunities to really figure out what's in you and being able to bring that to market. I think that's I think that's so powerful. I think that this is one of those things that God gives us that we get to, birth at some point in our lives. So
Absolutely.
I applaud you for the work that you're doing. Do you have a vision for like how big this would get or how many people you'll impact?
My hope is that 1 million in my lifetime of what I have left. And the way to do that is through the company Cosmos Renewed as an advisory. But two, I believe my family's journey was deeply impacted by the quality of education that we received, that we were fortunate. It enabled us to leapfrog kind of my parents' journey, what they had achieved. And so I believe in that. Been part of my journey has been focused on systems and education, quality of education. So I believe part of the Unknowns Rising vision is to create micro communities of learning for young people going forward that help them define kind of the tools of how to their hero's journey, how do they develop their purpose with clarity, how do they actually build things that lead to value to their community in some way, meaning artificial intelligence agents and those tools, and do that now and understand how to work with those tools. I had the pleasure to support my daughter in a presidential AI competition, and her purpose, part of it, she loves people. So
Mhm.
she focused in on foster care, kids aging out of foster care, and how do the importance of home. Like she appreciates her room and making it her own, and towards mental health and just kind of caring of self. So she developed this kind of, it wasn't an agent, but it was an AI supported tool that could help do an interview of an aging out young person from foster care to see this is what I want, and almost take that to create a plan of what your mock-up of your own room. It was like a room concierge. How do you create a room and then going into the community to have people actually connect to that need and fulfill it. And so she was the Wisconsin state champion of that competition. She didn't get to go to the White House, but to do that, but it inspired her to say, I can build something meaning and use these tools to create value. So she is an incredible young person and learned a lot from it. But that is the vision, to help identify future leaders like her and others like Sebastian, who's a junior in Illinois. He's currently building a 2D platformer game that's focused on his personal experience. So his purpose is to reduce human suffering in teenagers that suffer from bullying, mental health, and that type of experience. And he's doing that through a game, an online game that he's currently building with me. I'm coaching him, coming alongside his family, his mom, and he wants to be a 1517 fellow in the future, going to San Francisco to the camp. So that is the future vision, helping find these future builders, leaders, scientists, supporting them, at least for my journey, sharing my encounter with God and how that changed me as a builder, and helping them find their own journey of being. That is the vision, Rick, that we're actively pursuing right now.
How exciting. How exciting. You mentioned a 1517 fellow. I don't know that our audience knows what that is.
Yeah. So it came out of the Peter Thiel Fellowship, the Thiel Fellowship. And people of his team created this 1517 fund. And one of the things that they do is it's the same concept, trying to find early future disruptors, right, of industry and try and help them connect with them, their vision, and then being the first check that funds their future vision prototype company. And so they have this middle school, high school camp for future founders. And part of my mission was connecting, because of their network, to millionaires and investors. These future founders are going to need capital, right? So it's helping build their potential to know how do you pitch? How do you know who you are as a builder, your non-negotiables? And then so Sebastian's is enrolled in this camp now. And it's part of just understanding who he is as a builder and being around people that could actually fundamentally change the future of his vision, but by being able to fund that initial check that builds his prototype and helps him find the initial base of his whatever future customer will be.
Amazing. That sounds like a wonderful program. The name of the show, as you know, is called the Relentless Pursuit of Winning podcast. And so we generally as humans can figure out what winning looks like. And this can be something small, it can be something huge. The challenge that we have sometimes is maintaining that relentless pursuit. And I'd love it if you could offer our audience some advice on how to maintain that relentless pursuit.
What I know now, I would say 3 points. So 1, build for people, measure what matters, and then refuse to scale harm.
Refuse to scale
harm.
Okay.
Yeah. So when you think about the algorithms of social media, right? The fundamentals incentives behind current social media models of driving attention at the risk, when having worked with the number of young people I work with in the levels of mental health crisis and body image from like the Instagram algorithm, for example, and the impacts of actually not building the guardrails around that technology and releasing it across a population of adolescents without knowing you're scaling harm. And so I would say for that reason, I say that the future of human flourishing requires you to truly understand human pain, is my perspective, right? That's my opinion. That's how I see the world. So build for people truly. What will lead to their ongoing benefit as human beings, a peace of mind, quality of life, and then you do measure what matters. And in this case, I don't think that they're measuring the appropriate thing in that thing, like number of users, number of eyes, and number of retention of attention. Where that's actually can be deeply problematic for the future of critical thinking and focus of young people. So I hope that would be my counsel to folks that are building technologies, products, services, is to use that threefold to take a step back and consider. And if their solution to the world were scaled, threefold, tenfold, at the end of the day, are they creating more harm than good? And if it's good, I'd say, man, go all in. And if not, I would say pause and reconsider what the metrics you're using to frame your success or the success of your, whatever the essence of what you're building is.
Very good thought. I love that. It makes me think about, as we progress, as we're building, just using that as, kind of the grounding principles. And then at each level that we build at, we step back, as you said, take that step back and say, okay, are we doing this the right way? Because things change, people change, the scope changes, but as long as we go back and we measure, people measurement and, scaling without harm, that's really powerful. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
If people want to get a hold of your books, what's the best way to do that?
they can go to unknownsrising.com. They can find the link there to get the book on Amazon or other distributors. And if they wanted to stay in touch with me, they can sign up for our newsletter there and stay focused on kind of what the journey is up to date. But I'd love to connect with people in your audience, Rick, and just hear how we can be helpful or how we can get involved with what they're doing as well. So thank you for this time.
Absolutely. Are you on LinkedIn as well?
LinkedIn, yep. LinkedIn and Instagram are my two most active channels, so they can find me on there as well.
Fantastic. I really enjoyed our conversation. I really appreciate you being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rick.
And folks, thank you so much for watching or listening to another episode of the Relentless Pursuit of Winning podcast. We'll catch you next time.